All right, I'm here with Cameron Bishop, and he is the managing director at Raincatcher. How's it going, Cameron?
It's going great today. It's Friday.
Yeah. I'm excited to get into some of the tactical aspects of M&A, but before we get there, let's talk about your background. What got you into the space?
I have a very unusual background for an investment banker. Started my career as an advertising copywriter in a small technical publishing company. Not long after I joined, we were sold off. When I started there, it was a $7 million business. We were sold to the Macmillan Book Publishing Company, which was a Fortune 100 company at that time. And they said, hey, we like this technical magazine business. We want you to go buy companies. Didn't tell us how to do it, so we just started doing it. And over the years, we grew that company from 7 million to 400 million, throwing off 100 million in EBITDA. With that particular roll-up, which was ultimately 50% public on the New York Stock Exchange and 50% owned by Colbert Kravis Roberts. I did about 40 buy-side deals, and we would oftentimes carve out non-strategic assets, repackage them, and sell them off. So we might be doing 3 to 5 buy-side deals and 2 to 3 sell-side deals all at the same time. I ran that company for my last 3 years there. We had about 2,000 employees in 23 U.S. offices and 5 foreign countries. Took time off, wrote a business plan, shopped it all over the country to private equity. Ended up partnering with JP Morgan Chase's private equity division, which was a $6 billion fund at that time. And we launched a business from my kitchen, and we hit about 120 million in 3.5 years or so. So that's a big chunk of my buy-side, sell-side. So I've done about 50 buy-side deals and 40-some sell-side deals, about a little over $500 million in private equity money I spent over that 35 plus years.
Nice. I do love talking to people who have been in the driver's seat, especially at that scale, where you have thousands of employees and so many moving parts. And I think it's just a different level of thinking, that you have to be at when you're making the moves to turn the ship, and the ship turns a lot slower than, the smaller speedboats. But it's a fundamentally different way of really sort of going through the decision-making process, which is a good segue into my first question here, which is my favorite around mistakes. So all the deals that you've seen on the buy side, on the sell side, what are mistakes that kill deals for the most part when they're in diligence, or just in general? How do they fall apart?
Well, that for me is the essential question, and why I like to be a guest on podcast is to kind of share that message. It's become a passion for me. After working on the management side of companies, I spent 5 years as a partner in a boutique consulting firm doing exit and transition planning. And it's one of the reasons why I joined the investment banking firm I'm with now. Raincatcher is to help these business owners because I've just seen, Steve, so many mistakes these owners make. And when I was on the buy side, I could see ways that if they had properly packaged and prepared their company for sale, I would have had to pay them anywhere from hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars more for their company than what we actually paid. And if it was a self-sourced deal where we weren't in a competitive environment, they were often not represented by professionals. We never paid top dollar for those companies, and it wasn't my job to tell them that. But at the same time, I thought it was pretty sad, because for most business owners, their company is their source of retirement and usually generational wealth. So they need to know how to maximize it, and that's where we come in to try to send that message for them. They're just not properly prepared in so many different ways, many of which are pretty fundamental mistakes. And as an investment banker, I see that every day. It's sad, really truly sad, when I have to explain to an owner who calls us wanting to sell his or her company, and the criteria or the problems in the business, which they don't really realize, are either going to make it unsellable or it will sell for a steep discount, and usually combined with really unattractive deal structure and deal terms.
And it's a good segue into preparedness. I think this is the number one question that people stick around for, other than mistakes. That's always the top one. People want to know how they can sort of learn from others' missteps. But when it comes to preparing, what are some tactical things people listening can do today if they're operating a business to prepare for an exit?
Yeah, absolutely. The standard rule of thumb or axiom that I see constantly is that business owners generally spend 95% of their time working in their company, and sadly, maybe only 5% of their time working on their company. And they don't even really understand the difference between the two. But to really make that a priority, they have to think through an exit plan. So every business owner is going to leave their company one way or the other. They can either do it voluntarily or involuntarily. And if they do it voluntarily, they have to make a conscious decision on when that might be, and that will help them set the timetable on how they begin to prepare and groom their company for sale and fix the areas that need to be fixed or improved. And in a perfect world, it's great if they start that 5 years before they're going to initiate an exit. But in our world as investment bankers, we're thrilled if we get a business owner who's been thinking about that for at a minimum at least a year, 2 years, or 3 years to affect change and properly package the company so that it will be sellable.
I like that. Yeah, 2-3 years. I've heard a lot of different kind of runways, I guess you could say, leading up to it and how to kind of prepare, because I've seen and heard from a lot of people, myself included, where you don't want to fall into the distressed basket. You don't want to come across as that things have gone south or anything like that, and then it's transferable as an asset, and that does take time to actually do. And it's almost painful to a lot of people to hear that, where they, because to build a business, usually you got to be moving at a pretty rapid clip on everything that you're doing. Right. And some people hear 2-3 years and they're like, that seems like a lifetime to to prepare. But ultimately, for the outcome, you really just have to take a beat and really think through it. And usually hiring a banker or a broker, however you want to look at it, an advisor of some kind to walk you through it actually helps a lot with having somebody come through buttoned up to go through all the financials and getting everything lined up. So when we talk about valuation, what are some things people can do? Obviously, we talked about getting bookkeeping and everything ready, but what can people do to put their best foot forward when it comes to driving that value up?
Sure. Well, of course, different industries and different companies have kind of unique factors that are primarily exclusive or heavily relevant for them, but the fundamentals that we see on a consistent basis and are the things that are the biggest barriers to sellability or the ability to get a maximum valuation. And to step back for just a second, when we're marketing a business for sale and we have interested buyers who sign an NDA to learn more about the company, we interview them on a video call. And the things I will describe here that are the fundamental problems are all of the first questions they ask us that oftentimes are an automatic out for them, or they put up a red flag. So we'll check the boxes here. First and foremost is their accounting. I could tell 2 hours on your show of horror stories with bad to terrible to no accounting. I have people want to sell their company and we ask them, what's your revenue? Some don't know. We ask them what their EBITDA profit is, or at least their net income. Many don't know those. Almost all of them are on a cash basis versus a GAAP accrual basis. And buyers want to see GAAP financials. And if buyers are going to borrow money from banks, the banks want to see GAAP financials. So if a business owner begins the selling process a year or two in advance, they could work with outside CPAs or accounting professionals to convert their financial reporting from cash to GAAP accrual. And I'll explain a little bit further down here why the GAAP accrual, besides being required by buyers and banks, is so important as a measurement tool. The next most important thing we see, which is classic in privately owned companies, is what we refer to as owner dependency. And there are a few key factors around that. First is if that owner is the key source of knowledge and expertise in the company, and there isn't a strong number two, that's at least a yellow flag, if not a red flag for buyers. And ironically, most sellers, when they want to sell, they have plans to leave the company in a fairly short to mid period of time. And buyers, if they're going to buy the business, while buyers are willing to take on risk, at the same time they're very risk averse, so they're going to need that owner to stay on for, anywhere from a year to 5 years, depending on the situation. Secondly, is if the owner is the key relationship holder or key sales business development person in the company, that's another huge red flag. Simple example, I talked to a business owner here just recently who wanted to sell, and we asked the question, when a potential customer calls the company, who answers the phone? And he proudly said, no kidding, well, he answered the phone because everybody called his cell phone. And he can't leave the business because he owns all of the relationships. The third kind of key test we ask is, when did you last take a vacation? And many owners will kind of puff up their chest and proudly say, well, I haven't taken a vacation in a year, or 2 years, or 3 years. We don't see that as a good thing, because that generally means they have concerns about whether the wheels will fall off the company if they go away for a week or two. I've got an active client right now who's just the opposite. We asked that question, and he said, well, I'm headed to Africa for 3 weeks on a hunting trip, and he was going to be completely off the grid. And that's a business that is well run and not dependent on that owner. So those are some of the key factors around there. And the challenge for most business owners today is that most of them are S Corps or LLCs, so they're pass-through entities for taxes, which means at the end of the year, they're going to take a distribution of those profits. But if they have to provide a succession plan and hire a strong person to come in as their number two, they're going to have to pay that person a pretty good income, which of course reduces their distribution at year end, and they don't understand how they will get a return on that investment in an increased valuation at the time of sale because they have a succession plan in place.
I like that it's the metric of vacation, of how to really dial in how well the business is run. And I have heard that before, that just because it's a good measurement for buyers to know what type of kind of crazy situation they're getting themselves into, just from a simple question like that. So there's a saying that's come up on this podcast a couple times called the fish and chip method. And it is where buyers will fish with the enterprise value that you really want, and then they'll chip away at it as they go. So I want to talk about retrading. I think retrading deals happens all the time. You get under LOI, you begin the process, and of course, just like an inspection on a property, people find things that they want to use and negotiate and kind of drive that valuation down. So what are some things that sellers, people that are running businesses, can do to really sort of protect themselves when it comes to that retrade, that fish and chip method that we've seen time and time again? What are some of the methods that you've seen work?
Yeah, well, the key thing for these owners is to have a really buttoned up, well-disciplined business with strong records, strong financial reporting. the ability to forecast their business. But Steve, our opinion at Raincatcher is that a lot of that can be controlled and minimized by having good investment banking representation. And the way that works is, in our case, we go through, when a buyer signs an engagement with us, we go through a very rigorous process that we call Sell-Side Diligence. So in any kind of business, we know 90+% of the information that buyers are going to want to see. So we have the seller provide all that information for us up front. And to be frank, it's a huge lift for them. And we warn them in advance. It's a full-time job on top of a full-time job. But the advantage is, and there's 100 boxes or more that they have to check in terms of data, reports that they upload for us, but we read everything they upload. So it allows us to get ahead of any potential issues. And oftentimes we find some real strengths that can be used for marketing that the owner doesn't even know is a strength for his business. But we're far better off knowing if there's hair on the deal or hiccups that are going to have to be overcome ahead of the game, rather than have to be in a scramble mode and a defensive mode when a buyer digs into that data and says, wait a minute, what's the deal with this? Mm-hmm. So we control for that a lot. We also control for it in the details we ask for in letters of intent on the deal, and we interview all these potential buyers. So they've been pretty thoroughly vetted, and the markets are small. When there are types of buyers are going to do whatever they can to retrade a deal. The biggest challenge we see where a retrade has a potential to occur is something that's definitely not in our control as an investment banker, and sometimes not even the control of the seller, and that's when the financial performance of the business, generally once we're under an LOI, begins to trail off. And that's when you might see a buyer want to essentially retrade the deal or reset the price based on the current, usually trailing 12-month performance in the business. And even then, there are ways to negotiate around or structure that in ways that may not be just a direct reduction in the purchase price. It may be adjusted in deal structure or other deal terms to maybe minimize some of that retrade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the sort of drawdown post LOI concept is very common. Having the foot kind of come off the gas while you've taken on basically two jobs at that point. It's almost like you're signing an employment agreement with that LOI where you got to help them learn the business, learn all the ins and outs. So distraction can ultimately lead many times to decline, and rightfully so. The buyer can come back and retrade. So I think that there's a lot of things that are in control and out of control. So understanding that is crucial. So let's shift to timing. Yeah. This is very general. Every business is different. Everybody's in different chapters, everything. But when is the right time to sell?
Well, the one thing so a lot of timing is very personal for the individual. So the first question we ask a business owner when they contact us about selling is, all right, why do you want to sell? And it's not a judgment decision we're going to make there. It's to help us understand their motives and what we will need to do to help them. You hear sad stories. There's a divorce. There's a breakup among partners. Either the owner has a health issue or his or her spouse has a health issue. Those are key drivers. And then, of course, there's the typical, it's time for me to retire. And what we hear all the time now, sadly, is, especially with the vast number of baby boomer generation-owned companies, their children have no interest in coming into the business. And they finally look around and say, well, I'm left with no choice but to sell. So for us, that trend is a very good thing. We're on record pace this year. Much of it is driven by that very market dynamic that's occurring. So a big part of that is personal. The one thing we hate to see is when an owner decides to sell when their company is declining, because that's a case where, and depending on degree, that it's either not going to sell at all, or it's going to sell at a steep discount, and it's going to sell with generally unattractive deal terms and deal structure. But sadly, that's when we see a lot of owners finally decide that that's it, I got to sell.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a fun sort of segue into red flags, because buyers are all different walks. You have PE firms, you have high net worth individuals, you have roll-ups, you have all these different types of buyers that are going to come to you and approach you. And if you're running a good business, many times it's weekly you're getting outreach from these people. Right. So what are some initial red flags for people listening to look at for buyers that are coming to them?
Yeah. Well, in most industries today, we were talking to these company owners, they're getting inundated, maybe 5 to 10 contacts a week in a lot of cases. And if they're in any kind of a service-based business, especially ones that have maintenance contracts or consistent reoccurring revenue, they could be getting even more weekly contacts. And the biggest mistake we see them make, the biggest red flag, is to just bite on an offer from one of these individuals. Because as I said early on our call, Steve, when I was on the buy side, I loved nothing more than to be in a non-competitive buying environment, because there was nobody that was going to push me to a maximum price. And these owners really don't have an idea what the true value of their company is, unless they're in a competitive process where they're seeing multiple bids. And the only way they're really going to do that is to have a professional representing them to market the company. Because at the end of the day, the market will set the price on any deal. We give our clients a valuation range, low end, midpoint, and high end, to help them make a decision on whether to sell or not. But we've seen, and when we go to market on an open bid basis. And one simple example, but it's not unique. I had a client that we valued at a midpoint price of $19 million. They thought I was too high, so they went outside and got an independent certified valuation, which came back at $19 million. But it was in an industry sector that was actively being rolled up by private equity. And so it was a very competitive environment. And because I came from working for private equity for so many years, I understood the mentality, and I leveraged two bidders against each other, and we got those four owners of that company $28 million for their business. And that's a little bit of an outlier, but it's not uncommon for us to be able to overperform when we are in a competitive bidding process to help our clients get a maximum valuation.
Nice. And that takes us to the finale. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell Cameron 10 years ago?
Well, I'll tell you, it sounds corny, but I absolutely love what I do now. I finished up my career running companies, doing a very, very complex turnaround on a $60 million 501c3 business that like to kill me. It was so intense. It was 24/7, 365 for 3 solid years on a contract. And my contract expired during COVID. I got bored, and I said, what do I like to do? I like buying and selling companies. Did my research, found Raincatcher, found we were completely aligned on mission, vision, values, and most importantly, ethical standards. I honestly wish I'd have joined the firm 5 years earlier and gotten out of the process of managing people, which has become increasingly challenging. But I really enjoy the rewards and satisfaction of helping these business owners achieve their kind of life goal and be able to exit and live, financially extremely well off in almost every case.
Very nice. Very nice. So where can people learn more about Raincatcher, and where can people find you?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I would be happy to talk to your listeners. No cost, no obligation, no sales pitch, just to answer questions if I can for them. But you can reach me by email at cameron.bishop@raincatcher.com. You can find me through our corporate website, www.raincatcher.com, or they could easily message me on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, wherever you guys are listening on iTunes or Spotify, the links that Cameron mentioned will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your wisdom, Cameron.
You bet, Steve. I really appreciate you having me on.